Here to discuss a new era for Pennsylvania, welcome Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Here to lead the conversation is John Dickerson, anchor of CBS News Primetime with John Dickerson and chief political analyst at CBS News.
These are
they're very cushy,
seats.
yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Does this count as a red carpet hairdo, or
I don't know.
it's like the red living
I'm a
room?
little colorblind, but this is very bright.
Yes, exactly. It's very calming, though. I feel it's.
Yeah. Are we crossing our legs? Is that? I don't really know what to do here. I was not expecting a start like this. All right.
Heavy.
I feel like we're doing great, though.
Yeah. These are the kinds of leadership decisions we
Thank
want
you.
to hear from you about.
Yes. I'll try and figure it out during the.
First leg crossing, then your opinions on flossing.
There you go. All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the 48th governor of Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Governor, as we settle ourselves into these voluminous chairs, let's start with, this is the week for presidents and presidential candidates to visit the union workers in Detroit. President Biden was there, former President Trump paid a visit. You've got a strong union presence in your state, and you tweeted 6 days ago, "I stand with the striking UAW workers, and I made clear these workers and their families deserve to share in the record profits these companies are making. The gap between what executives are making compared to what workers are earning is growing. We need to reverse that." Let me focus on the last part. We need to reverse that. Do you mean with respect to the auto companies or more broadly? Because obviously the gap between CEO pay and regular pay has widened a great deal.
I was trying to make 2 points there. Number one, I stand with those UAW workers. I think that they do deserve to reap more benefits from the hard work that they perform. And while all the focus has been on Michigan, we've got folks in Pennsylvania who are members of UAW who do that important work. The second point I was trying to make is a broader one, and that is that when you look back in the history of the union movement, look back in the history of this nation, at the times where we have the closest gap between the workers and the executives, that's when union membership is at its highest. As union membership goes down, that gap grows. I don't think that that's accidental. My view is that we need to make sure that we protect union rights, and as governor, I want to expand union rights in Pennsylvania. I want to make sure that that gap between the worker and the guy or the woman who gets to sit in the executive suite is made closer. I think that
How do you do that?
I think that division right now is one of the things that's actually leading to more division in our politics. I'm sure we'll talk about some politics today. How do we do that? We make sure we protect the union way of life. We make sure that we expand opportunities to join a union. We make sure that that wage gap is narrowed as much as we can. And when we have executives, I'm the chief executive of my Commonwealth, we invest in our workforce. We not only invest in their wages and benefits, we break down barriers to entry and give more people opportunity. I think that's what we're focused on in the Commonwealth.
Quick symbolic question. I stand with the striking UAW workers. Are you, any chance you might make that anything more than metaphorical?
I mean, physically go to Michigan? I mean,
or where they're striking in your state,
they are striking in the southeastern part of our state. Look,
Bucks County, I believe, is a swing district.
Picket lines. I've stood with striking workers. There may be an opportunity for me to physically do that here, but I thought it was really important to make clear where I stood in this issue.
You touched on it a little bit, but now let's broaden this out outside of the unions. I mean, the pressures and forces that union workers are facing and that the car companies are facing as they try to transition from gasoline-powered cars to electric vehicles are a part of some of the pressures in our economy. You have worked to try to change the access to the American dream in your state more broadly. Talk a little bit about that and whether you think, because the old route to the American dream was you sign up with the company, there's a social contract with the employer, you have kind of the workers would help the company would help the workers. That's at least the theory of it in the American system. Right. What's the state of that contract right now and what needs to be fixed for it to work in your state?
I think the contract in many ways has been broken or it's threatened. I think too often times we set these arbitrary requirements, arbitrary barriers to entry. I believe in Pennsylvania, and I would argue it'd be healthy for this nation, that we should have the freedom to chart our own course and the opportunity to succeed. One of the best ways you do that is you lay a foundation for folks that's fair and equitable, and then give them the opportunities to be able to move forward through that. Let me give you a concrete example of that. On day one of my administration, I signed an executive order doing away with the college degree requirement for 92% of state government jobs. That's 66,000 jobs.
Now, why is that important?
I'll tell you why it's important. Because to set an artificial barrier to entry for someone who has the skills, who has the knowledge, the determination, but says, you can't do that job unless you've got a college degree, that's not fair. And by the way, it also doesn't make sense. At a moment where every city, every state, every part of our nation, it seems, is struggling with workforce issues, why the hell would we make it harder for people who, in my case, want to serve in public service, who have the skills and can't do it? I'll tell you when this got crystallized for me. I ran an entire campaign for governor about real freedom. And real freedom means having access to that market, having access to that job, not having people erect those barriers to entry. I was at a firehouse in a rural community in Pennsylvania. I just wrapped up my remarks, was signing stuff, talking to people, and someone came over to me and said, I'm really looking forward to you being my boss. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I work for the Department of Environmental Protection. I said, well, I'm going to be your colleague, not your boss, but go on, explain. And he said, I work in such and such a division, and I train for the last nearly 2 decades. I train all the folks with this particular skill who go out and do this research, this investigation in our communities. And I said, well, are you like the manager or whatever? What's your title? You deputy secretary or something? He goes, no. He goes, I've actually, I train all the people that go on to be deputy secretary, but I'm still at this level. And the reason is I don't have a college degree. Think about that. This is the guy who's actually training everybody to do the work, but because of an arbitrary degree requirement, we shut him out of a future of opportunity. Let me offer you one other proof point, if I may. We're struggling in Pennsylvania, and I think this is true across the country when you look at the data, to be able to recruit and train highly skilled, highly qualified, diverse set of police officers. Now, I'm someone who believes we need more police in this country, not less. I'm someone who believes people have a right to both be safe and feel safe. I understand there may be some in this room or some watching who disagree with that, but that's my view. Now, I believe if you look at the way we are recruiting, we're not doing a good enough job making sure police officers look like the communities they're sworn to serve and protect. So we dropped the college degree requirement for our state police in Pennsylvania 1 month ago yesterday. Now, in the last year, we had 1,800 applicants to be state troopers in Pennsylvania. In the last month, we had 1,200 applicants after we dropped that college degree requirement. Now, are we going to hire all of them? No. And are they going to go through rigorous training and a selection process? Absolutely. But we got over 500 of those individuals who would have been shut out of the process before. They're people who want to serve, probably have military background, probably have other important backgrounds who are going to help us keep our communities safe. This is common sense to remove those barriers to entry and help our communities be safer and stronger.
So we're going to click through a couple of different things, but I want to know if you have one more thing, because what we're talking about here actually, is access, that freedom you're talking about to, the American way of life. So what else quickly would you think we should focus on, or that you're focused on, in terms of creating greater opportunity for people?
Look, I think you have to invest in public schools in this country. I'm certainly doing that in our Commonwealth. We passed a budget that invests more in public education than at any time in the history of Pennsylvania. And it's important to note, I'm the only governor in the nation with a full-time divided legislature. So to get that through Republicans and Democrats was not easy. But I'll also say, to answer your question directly, John, it's not just about writing a check to our schools. It's what do you do with those funds? So to create more opportunity, we put more funding into VOTEC. Now they call it CTE nowadays, but we put more money into that. And expanding that definition out to include farming and include computer science. We need more welders and plumbers in this country. We should start training them in high school, giving them that opportunity.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the business of governing. This is enough. This is almost as much of a softball as these are made of soft material.
I'm still not sure. Yeah.
I-95.
Yeah.
All right.
Anybody ever been on 95?
What did you learn from that experience about the capacity to move quickly, and how much of what you learned about the capacity to get things done quickly was really because it was an emergency and can't be ported into the rest of the job you do?
Yeah, that's fair. Let me take a quick half step back to set the table. I-95 through Northeast Philadelphia, 175,000 cars and trucks every single day, one of the busiest roadways in our nation. Obviously goes from Maine to Florida. That's a key choke point, and I got a call 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning from my chief of staff. Tanker truck caught fire underneath a 200-plus foot bridge or overpass. It was so hot that it caused 95 to literally collapse. The experts told us it would take months to repair. Now, we got 95 reopened in 12 days. And I want to tell you how we did that. We did it on the strength, back to your first question, of organized labor. Union labor rebuilt I-95, and I'm proud of them for doing that. We did it on the strength of innovative thinking, creative thinking, quick thinking. To answer your question directly, the one thing I was able to do, because it was an emergency situation, is I was able to sign a declaration which allowed us to get through the procurement process, lickety-split.
If you hadn't, how long would that have taken?
That could have taken weeks or months. But after that, I see you smirking. Hold on, let me finish.
It's not a smirk. It's not a smirk.
After
Deep
that,
interest in what you're saying.
Everything we did could be applied to any road project, bridge project, pipe project, whatever, today. Here's what we did. We empowered people on the ground to be leaders. They didn't have to stop their work and call headquarters and wait for a bureaucrat to answer their question. So number one, we encourage people to be leaders on the scene. We also encourage them to think innovatively about a solution. So I was over top of 95 a few hours after the collapse in a helicopter looking down, and I said something effective, why don't we just fill that whole hole with dirt and pave over it? And they all looked at me and wanted to be like, this guy's a real idiot, but they couldn't say that because he's the governor, but they were thinking it. They didn't say it directly in my face. But through a whole series of conversations through that night and early next morning, leaders on the ground said, you know what? Instead of filling it with dirt, we're going to use a recycled aggregate that's lighter than dirt, doesn't take any time to settle. You can pave right over it, and we think that will make the process go more quickly. The reason folks felt comfortable to kind of raise their hand and speak up about that is we were encouraging them to be leaders, encouraging them to be innovative, and because they were willing to do that, because organized labor was quite literally being willing to work 24/7, when the eyes of the nation were on us, they saw that we could get this done quick, and they saw that we could do big things. And I would hope that every American took some pride in that, because it showed what American labor and American ingenuity can still accomplish. We talk ourselves down too much in this nation, and we need to talk ourselves up because we can do big things again.
Here's why I'm interested in this and why I gave you all that pristine runway. I was talking to an administration official who said much of their job at the beginning was just laying pipe, which is to say, getting the capacity there to even execute any of their grand ideas.
Yeah.
And that when you come in it, and when you're a governor, when you come in any executive position, there's a lot of stuff, procurement policy, there's all this stuff you got to learn about, and then it's 3 years into the job and you haven't been able to do anything. So the capacity to act quickly, to move from idea to execution, is a challenge for any executive, for any administrator, for any president. So what I'm wondering is whether this instance, so that was one, how do you, in practice, say to somebody, I'm empowering you? How does that, in a practical way, happen? And can you replicate it in a non-emergency environment?
You can, and we have in multiple ways in my administration. It starts in my administration with 3 letters, GSD, and since this is a family show, I'll just say it means get stuff done. And that is how we live every single day in our administration. I'm a sports guy, it's our job to put points on the board every single day for my constituents, for the people of Pennsylvania. They don't want me to go to work and just talk. They want me to go to work and act. So 95 is a great example of that. Here's another example. You want to get something done in Pennsylvania, you need a permit or you need a license. It's probably true in every other city and every state. The typical permit we give out in Pennsylvania is like a corporate filing, a business license. Well, the day I got sworn in, it took 8 weeks to get that. When you start to look under the hood and you ask the bureaucracy, well, why is it taking 8 weeks? What do you need to process this and that? And you push the bureaucracy and you show an interest as the manager, as the leader, as the executive in the outcomes and how long it's going to take, and you bring that aggressive attitude to everything, you can really make change. Case in point, that corporate filing that took 8 weeks the day I got sworn in now takes 3 days in Pennsylvania, just 3 days. And we have example after example like that where we've been able to speed up the bureaucracy, get stuff done, and put points on the board for folks. We need to show people that we can deliver for them. And by the way, there's a byproduct of this that I think makes our democracy and our government and public service, the idea of it, stronger, and that is that folks are down and frustrated right now. They kind of think government can't do big things. I think that's one of the reasons why they were so excited about 95 and what we were collectively able to do there, federal, state, and local government working together. They want to see their government work. And if we can show them government works, whether on a permit or a road, then we can hopefully restore people's faith in our democracy and in our democratic institutions, which is something I take very seriously. I think I have a responsibility, along with others, to try and improve the way people feel about government and make sure everyone knows that government can be a positive, productive force for good in people's lives.
And we're going to get to that democracy protection because to the extent people are frustrated with the way government does or doesn't work, they go around it and find their own methods to affecting the change they want, which can sometimes be violent. But let's leave that aside for just a moment. Infrastructure is a key challenge and a key thing for economic growth in any state. What's the most important infrastructure improvement for you in your sprawling state? I mean, is it roads? Is it the airports? Is it trains? What's the most important thing or the most effective thing you could do to increase economic growth in your state?
It's hard to pick one. I will, because you asked, but I would just say, generally speaking, if you look at the trajectory of our nation throughout history, the positive economic growth, positive job growth, the positive outcomes we've seen in communities have oftentimes correlated with significant investments in infrastructure. You invest in infrastructure, you tend to have positive things happen, particularly the way the Biden administration has set up the latest infrastructure influx of funds where there's real equity attached to it, which is critically important for communities that have oftentimes been left behind. Look, roads, bridges, critically important for obvious reasons. I got communities in Pennsylvania where they're still drinking water out of lead pipes. I don't have to explain to you how critically important that is. And that's particularly in black and brown communities that have oftentimes been ignored when it comes to infrastructure investment. I would say that the game changer on infrastructure investment really is high-speed affordable internet. Pennsylvania is vast, 13 million people, 276,000 homes, businesses, VFWs, churches that lack connection to the internet. About another 25,000 or so that have some connection, but it's just not fast enough to be able to do anything. It's going to cost a little over $1 billion to connect everybody to the internet. The good news is federal government's provided that money to Pennsylvania. We have a 5-year plan to connect everyone to the internet. You're going to see better health outcomes, education outcomes, economic outcomes, personal mental health outcomes, assuming you go to the right websites, with folks having access to the internet. That's going to be a game changer, especially for rural communities in Pennsylvania that have just been, shut out for too long.
Speaking of rural communities, one of the rural communities have been hard hit by the opioid crisis over the years. Pennsylvania, I think that these are maybe 2020 numbers, but was among the states with the highest rates of mortality due to drug overdoses. When you came into office, how did you scope that problem? And what's the state of it now and what can be done? Because this is something that all governors are wrestling with.
Yeah. I've been working on the issue of the opioid crisis for a number of years. Prior to serving as governor, I was the Attorney General of Pennsylvania and led the nationwide lawsuit against the drug companies. We reached into their greedy pockets, pulled out those ill-gotten gains and brought it back to the states that they had ripped off and that they had poisoned with their addictive pills. knowingly sending those pills into our communities. As a result of that legal work as Attorney General, it set Pennsylvania up, and other states as well, but Pennsylvania in particular, with nearly $2 billion available to combat the crisis. I get elected governor. Now we've got the opportunity to actually invest it. Right. So the first value statement here, and this is really critical, is I believe drug addiction is a disease, not a crime. And I think if you understand it that way, then what you do is you take those, in this case, $2 billion, and I realize the numbers are sort of meaningless.
Well, just let me throw in, is that $2 billion, isn't that over 18 years though?
It is over 18 years, front-loaded for the first 4. Okay. So you can really get a lot of this going. We are now in a position to invest to combat the crisis, and when you look at the crisis as a public health issue, when you look at it as a disease, not a crime, then naturally what comes from that is you're investing a lot more in treatment, a lot more in services, a lot more in support for those going into treatment, transportation, childcare costs, you name it. And that is what we are trying to do right now in Pennsylvania. We are losing 14 Pennsylvanians every single day to addiction. And it's hitting our rural communities even harder. We have got to get on top of this, and the way we do that is by investing more in treatment.
You talked about making sure that Pennsylvanians feel seen. How do you go, and how do you, if you do, go into those communities where they might not have been your voter?
Yeah.
They might be suspicious of you. How do you build that bridge to make those connections?
So look, I've got a long history of showing up. I think first and foremost, you got to show up. And I think, for a long time, being candid, some folks in our party, my party, stopped showing up and just started ignoring a lot of those communities. And I took a different approach. Look, I ran in 2016 for Attorney General. Nobody knew me. I showed up in those communities. And on the same ballot where Secretary Clinton lost for president, I was third on the ballot. I won. 2020, came back and outperformed everybody else on the ballot. Got more votes than anybody in the history of Pennsylvania. And then in 2022, ran for governor and got more votes than anybody ever got for governor. I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm saying that because I think the data bears out that showing up, listening to people, treating them with respect, John, something they oftentimes don't feel from their elected leaders, and then, most importantly, delivering for them, delivering meaningful results for them. I think that's critically important. I also, even now as governor, I didn't just stop showing up. I still go to these communities, and I enjoy going to the communities now where we have a meeting, and I treat you with respect, you're the governor right now, but then those that look me in the eye after and go, I didn't vote for you. First off, I appreciate their honesty, because pretty much everybody says they voted for me. Somehow I got 100 million votes in Pennsylvania. But no, I appreciate that because that shows a level of candor and willingness to engage. And I feel like that's what we need more of in our politics today, a willingness to engage from the citizenry to their elected officials and the elected officials to the citizenry. And I view that not as an up or down, but as a parallel conversation.
We talk, that I think is a segue to getting us into the health and fragility of our democracy. President Biden is in Arizona today, and he will say, there is something dangerous happening in America. Do you agree? And if so, what is the danger?
I didn't know the president was in Arizona. I didn't know he was going to say that. I'm assuming the danger he's speaking of is relative to our democracy.
He is. Right? It's a speech. This is the fourth, I believe, in a series of speeches in which he'll talk about the ongoing threat to democracy.
Look, it's hard for me to comment on his speech, but I will comment generally that I do believe our democracy is being tested. Throughout our nation's history, our democracy has been repeatedly tested. And if you look at each chapter in our American story, preserving, protecting our democracy, perfecting our union, has fallen oftentimes to the hands not of the elected leaders, but the ordinary citizens who, in moments of challenge, rise up and seek justice. They demand more from their leaders. And I think over the last, 2 or 3 decades, maybe we got a little complacent in that. We sort of lost perspective on that hard work that our ancestors did over many years. And then 2016 happened. And everything got turned on its head. And then, of course, January 6th made it visible for folks to see in a way that maybe they hadn't seen before. To me, what has happened over the last number of years is a reminder of how critical citizen participation is and how critical the work we need to do is to perfect our union and defend our freedoms. I do believe that right now is another critical moment where we're going to be tested.
Go ahead, no.
I was just going to say, the former president has tried to erode our institutions and erode our democracy time and time again. Hell, he sued me 40 times. 40 times, him and his enablers in 2020 to first make it harder for people to vote, particularly people of color, and second, to try and throw away votes to try and thwart the will of the people. By the way, I went 40-0 and he went 0-40. We kicked his ass every single time. That, combined with what he did, stoking those on January 6th who went to try and thwart the will of the people and stop the vote from being counted, and the manner in which he is conducting himself in the run-up to this 2024 campaign suggests that he's not done with his work to try and erode our democracy. We have to keep at this. We have to keep battling. We have to get back to a place in this country where we all accept that we are bound by our commitment to our democracy, to our nation, to our freedoms, and then let's fight like hell over healthcare policy and foreign policy and taxes and everything else. But we are not even having the same conversation right now, and I think the president is right to sound the alarm on the effect that the former president is having on our democratic institutions.
I've got a few more questions about the democratic process, but let me ask you about the courts as somebody who worked in it. There was generally a norm that you fight it out in court, you lose, well, the people, have spoken. The jury has spoken or the judge has spoken, and the integrity of the law, you might not like it, you might grouse about it, but essentially had some fixity. The former president has attacked every judge that has ruled against him. His party has either embraced that in some instances, calling into question various rulings, the grand jury system, et cetera. What's your assessment of the health of those norms about trusting the legal system and the way it's set up, and how much has it eroded from whatever it was before we came into this current period?
Look, and again, I'm a former attorney general of our Commonwealth. I do have faith in our system. I don't like every opinion that comes out, but I respect our courts, and our courts held in the last election. And so far, it seems like our justice system it's slow, but it seems like it is doing its job to make sure that there is accountability for those who were there on January 6th and for those who stoked the fire on January 6th. I think that we need to, as Americans, not love every opinion that comes from a court, not love every decision that comes from a prosecutor, but we do need to make sure that those institutions are protected from the political winds of the day.
You joined 23 other states in instituting an automatic voter registration. The former president called you a radical left governor for doing this. And
did he give me a nickname at least? Or?
And also that it was a totally unconstitutional act.
He's a real legal genius. Right?
But a couple of things, seriously. When he talks, some of his supporters get activated. When he said those things, was there any fibrillation in the universe with respect to other people reaching out in the ways that they do to your office? It's a really obscure way to ask that question.
Also, does anybody know what fibrillation means? Just so I know. No, look, first off, we are on sound legal footing, and the decision I made, as you correctly noted, is one that's been made in 23 other states, some led by Republican governors, some led by Democratic governors. The idea that we're just going to streamline a process, for legal, eligible voters, and somehow that is bad, is remarkable to me. But to the heart of your question, yeah, I mean, there's still some people out there that when he says jump, they turn around and say, how high? That's pathetic. I mean, I really think that one of the stories that should be written is how profoundly and pathetically weak these followers of his are. And some of them occupy really serious positions, Mr. Speaker. I mean, it is crazy to me. It's crazy to me how he has this ability to control folks who otherwise are pretty reasonably intelligent people. And it's dangerous for our institutions. I can deal with anyone who has a different view than I do. I mean, I actually relish that when we have different views and we can really hash it out. And by the way, sometimes I'm wrong and we have to go with the other person's view, or sometimes we find a middle ground. That's healthy, that's good. But where you're just malleable to the point where you're just willing to do whatever the hell the former president commands you to do on his goofy, Twitter adjacent, app or whatever, it's crazy to me. And it's dangerous for our institutions.
I'm glad you found a heart to the question. But the reason I asked it so obscurely is I was actually talking about threats.
You mean?
I mean, does your security team say, you've been called a radical left governor, it's totally unconstitutional? Because the heart of this question of democracy safety is, if it's a constant message that everything's being done extra constitutionally, if everything's being done around the right way of doing things, then some people might feel, well, gosh, the system is so rigged, I must take things into my own hands to make things right again. And that we saw certainly on January 6th.
January 6th, yeah. I mean, I think we know the answer to that question, is that there are some people out there, certainly not a majority of the nation, but there are people out there who are willing to go be violent.
Do you hear from them?
Look, I'm blessed to have a great group of people around me that keep me and my family safe. But I'm mindful that those folks are out there. And I think that's a danger in our society today.
Swing state, important election coming up.
Yeah.
What's the status of the voting process? And there was a study released recently that said you talked about citizen engagement, half of the poll workers who participated in and maintained the structure of a healthy voting system, which worked in 2020, half have dropped out, which means some of them are not being replaced, and the ones that are replacing them are all new and fresh to the job, which creates more challenges. So what's the health of the voting system, and what are you doing to ensure it in Pennsylvania?
John, my glass is maybe a little half fuller than the way your question was framed.
You do know what I do for a living.
I do. I do. I would say that the storyline from 2020 that sort of never gets written is that the reason why our institutions held were because of ordinary Republican and Democratic clerks in communities all across Pennsylvania who went and just did their jobs. They just did their jobs, and they did it honorably. And they counted the votes, and if John got one more vote than Josh, John won. And that's the way it's supposed to work. And so, yeah, we've seen, some communities where it's a little harder to get a poll worker, where they don't want to put up with the abuse and the nonsense. But overall, in communities all across our Commonwealth, we've had the level of citizen participation necessary to ensure that our elections have been free and fair and safe and secure. And in the time since 2020, guess what, John? Republicans have won and Democrats have won. The most important thing is the will of the people has been respected, and those clerks have carried out their duties really honorably.
But in preparation for the next one, what how much is this something that you need, that concerns you?
It concerns me. It concerned me when I was Attorney General, and I convened a group of both prosecutors as well as appellate attorneys who worked together to make sure that we had a free and fair, safe and secure election in 2020, and I'll be prepared to do it again as governor in 2024. The most important thing to me is that we have citizens engaged and participating in our democracy. I think more citizen participation equals a stronger democracy. That's why I made Pennsylvania an automatic voter registration state, and why I'm going to encourage people to get out and make their voices heard in 24.
On that automatic registration, you say you were within your rights to do it.
Yeah.
Would it have been smarter, in keeping with your notion of trying to reduce maybe the vitriol in our political system, to reach out to your Republican legislators and try to work with them on it, knowing how hot button this issue is?
Look, there's certain things that I have the authority to do as governor, in this case based on both federal and state law. And what I did was not put forth something that's partisan. I don't care how you register. I don't know how you're registering. What I tried to do, just like I did with the corporate filings, just like I did on 95, just like I've done with our unemployment compensation system, I've tried to streamline the process and make it work better for folks. So now when you go to the DMV, you already have to prove you're a citizen and you have to give over the government documents and this and that to get your license. We're just creating a seamless process for you to also be registered to vote. And if you want to opt out, opt out. You want to register to be a Democrat, Republican, Green, you register however you want. My job is to make it secure and streamlined, and that's what I did.
Speaking of secure and streamlined, I have no idea how much I've gone over.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't grabbed us yet.
They haven't.
So I do feel as though I'm sinking further into this chair.
No, a couple more hours and you'll be down there.
Yeah.
You'll be down there with the quarters and the other loose change. And the,
I tell you what.
All right, well, since nobody's come and taken us away.
Let's keep going. Should we keep going?
Yeah. You're going to New Hampshire.
Am I?
I thought you were.
Oh my goodness. Maybe I should have ended the interview a few minutes ago. Let's see where this is going.
Not to take anything away from New Hampshire. People go to New Hampshire for all kinds of reasons, but politicians go to New Hampshire for one reason, and that's to say something larger. I'm not even going to get to whatever your future ambitions are, but why are you going to New Hampshire?
Look, first off, I'm really proud that the Democratic Party in New Hampshire invited me to keynote their convention on Saturday. I'm proud of the fact that they reached out, and I'm proud because, thank you, I think they see what's happening in Pennsylvania, where we are defending freedom, where we're getting stuff done, where we're showing that you can govern in a hyper-polarized world. And I'm proud of the fact that we're going to now have an opportunity to both talk about the accomplishments we've made in Pennsylvania, campaign to make sure a Democrat gets elected governor of New Hampshire, campaign to make sure President Biden wins New Hampshire when he runs for re-election there, and hopefully have an impact on how we address these issues more broadly within our party and within our country. And so I'm excited for the opportunity to be able to do that.
You're excited, and not to bring back the word fibrillation again, but many fellow Democrats, their heart is in a state of fibrillation because they're nervous about their party, their president's ability to win again. What will you tell nervous Democrats about the state of things?
What Joe Biden's done for Pennsylvania. 276,000 homes and businesses are going to be connected to the internet because of the hard work he did to get an infrastructure law passed. In a divided world that we live in, he got that done. I'm going to talk about how we reopened I-95 in 12 days because the federal government partnered with us. I'm going to talk about how important it is to defend our freedoms in this country, the freedom for women to make decisions over their own body, the freedom for you to marry who you love, the freedom to be able to vote. All of that is on the ballot, and there are clear contrasts in this race between Joe Biden and presumably Donald Trump. And I think as folks focus on that clear contrast, the choice will be even clearer, and some of that whatever you said, will go away.
Fibonacci sequence.
The Google that when I'm done.
All right, the 48th governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.